when she omits initially, she has a complaint where she writes about this belligerence of her physically confronting and stopping a supervisor, authority of the OCJ. And of course, because that's not consistent with someone who is a little child who fears authority. I just thought I wanted to raise with you that she omitted it when she did this. And the point I was putting to you about that, because it's on the record, is that it's omitted because the first one indicates a person who is not timid, who's not docile. It doesn't submit. Is actually a very, very assertive person. It's not the person you are describing. Somewhere she uses words like uyanya, you shit.
I don't have that in front of me.
Yes, I'm saying because those are on the record. Would those statements, someone who says to someone uyanya, someone who's authority, would you agree with me that person cannot be described as a submissive, docile person?
Under those circumstances, no.
Yeah. Let me ask this last question. I asked Ms. Mengo this question, and I think it's better directed at you. Because you've testified several times, has it happened that there are complaints that are illegitimate?
Certainly.
Have you experienced false complaints?
Yes.
Would you agree with me that it's actually false complaints that undermine great work that people like you, and there are very few, and I'm not patronizing you, Lisa, you only, in this country, you are a leading intellectual for women on that aspect. Nobody writes, nobody has actually done this for women like you've done. And the point I'm putting to you is, does it undermine 30 years of your work and others when false claims are made, in your view?
That's a question people often ask, and the answer to that is only if you think that all women are the same and that if one woman lies, therefore everybody else lies. So, when somebody lies about their house having been broken into in order to claim insurance, we do not, therefore, having been broken into in order to claim insurance, we do not, therefore, start to doubt everybody who now goes and lays. That's the attitude we should take with these. One should make them less exceptional. We should allow for the fact that, yes, some women will not behave well. And the fact that some women behave well doesn't mean that all women behave well. Yes. And when one woman is not truthful, we shouldn't take that to mean as, reinforcement of the stereotype.
I didn't mean that. I know you're doing that to me, but I didn't mean that. You know what I mean. I'm not suggesting that when people generalize, they are right. I'm not. I know you're jumping to that because you want to nullify this point I'm making. People do undermine great things because the conduct of a minority or even of one person, it may not be right. But people generalize. People say so many things about black people when they've met one black person who did something. So I'm saying conduct of a person can undermine great work. And I'm saying to you, false claims may undermine great work in this patriarchal society where women are facing gender-based violence every day and sexual harassment every day. And it's a patriarchal society because men deny the sins they commit. And if even if it's one or two that make false claims, they perpetuate stereotypes and useless defenses by males who commit this. That's all I'm putting to you. That it does undermine great work. This term, sexual harassment, you will know, emerges, people grapple with it in America since 1970s, grappling with it, and you're still grappling with it. I'm saying to you, a false claim, as you say you've met some of them, undermine great work of few people like you who've been working under testing circumstances. It undermines that work. It has the effect of undermining that work. Do you agree with me?
If you allow to. Mr. Sikakani. So I think it's important as part of my work to try to push back at that kind of stereotype and
Sure.
at that kind of generalization. Just as it is important, as you point out, to say that because one black person does something bad,
Sure.
you do not generalize. And so one should always challenge any kind of generalization. So that would be my response. Does it undermine? Well, if one person can really undermine 30 years of bad work, and the point is, why would you want to focus on all those who go and ignore all those who are invisible? We're watching a case now.
It's fine.
We're not seeing the cases we don't.
It's actually, I put it to you that conduct of a few people can undermine great work of many people in circumstances where we're dealing with what you say is a patriarchal society, male-dominated society where males deny what they do and say claims are false. It does, you may not agree with me, that when one is found to be false, it has an impact on those who have true claims. But I suppose you don't agree with me for your reason.
It may well have an impact, but one must resist such generalizations in order to reduce the negative impact.
That's
So
fine.
sorry, just to I understand your answer to be saying it may well be that those who tell lies here and there, it may well be that they undermine the great job. But it shouldn't. It shouldn't be so, because after all, people lay false claims during burglary to claim insurance and the like, and we don't stigmatize
Correct.
those kind of false claims. Why should we begin to stigmatize almost in general when a few women here and there lie? Your answer is, I guess, it may do so, but it shouldn't.
That is correct. And
Sure.
I think your word stigmatizing is very, very important. And if I go back to stereotypes, the stereotype is that all women lie. And I'd say stereotypical. And we approach women's evidence with caution. So that's why it is important to allow for the fact that, yes, women aren't saints. They will behave badly and they will do things badly. But we must resist temptations to generalize and say, well, therefore we must revert to the previous position where we disbelieved, where we were of disbelief.
Yes, I agree with you. And I have no further question to you. Thank you very much for your testimony. Thank you, Chair.
Advocate Skippers, sorry. Okay, Advocate Skippers.
Thank you, Chair. Just a few questions.
Chair, it's me now who need a look. Can I be excused? No, I'm going to come back. I'm saying, can I be excused? I'm going to come back. Thank you.
All right.
I don't want to adjourn everything for.
Well, I don't know. Are you sure of that? Because we don't want to pressurize people here. All right, okay. Advocate Skippers.
Thank you, Chair. You have now indicated that you did read the cross-examination of the complainant as well. After reading that, is your opinion changed from your report?
No, it isn't. It's, I said, if you're looking at something like sexual harassment, you're looking for something that is repeated and persistent after somebody has said no. And you can see that when it comes to things like the photographs, that is repeated and persistent. So are questions about favorite sexual positions, even if you said surprise me. So are questions about let's be intimate. On more than one occasion, there is either a very clear no, or there's a whole lot of other things that get said, but the requested item, the photograph or whatever, is never actually forthcoming. So there are repeated and persistent requests. And there is an ambiguity in what the complainant is doing. As I said yesterday, she's by no means an ideal victim, in that she does engage in quite sexual terms at times, and then there are times where she's very definite, no, honourable member, hi. So that doesn't change.
You were also asked about the fact that you don't know the Xhosa culture, but will culture trump something, for instance, where someone persistently says no? Will culture have a role to play here? If someone continuously say no, do you have to look into culture then?
Well, that's a very tricky question. Some people would say yes, but I think if you look at the definition of sexual harassment, it's saying no.
All right, and then with regards to that, I don't know how to pronounce that surname, Koko, judgment, where the complainant made a statement. She referred to what was said in the appeal judgment. Are you familiar with that case?
I am, yes.
You also know that that judgment has ultimately been overruled by the SCA.
Yes.
So that judgment is what was said on that stage is no longer the case law.
Correct.
And the complainant was referring to the judgment.
At that point in time.
At that point in time. Thank you, Chair. I have no further questions.
Thank you, Chair. Ms. Vetten, it strikes me, having listened to your cross-examination today, that the focus of the cross-examination is almost entirely on Ms. Mengo's conduct. And it reminds me that despite all of the legal protections that we have to protect women from sexual harassment, at the end of the day, how we as women behave is regarded as more important than how a man behaves, a man who's your superior in the workplace. In fact, the most senior judge in the province, when he demands sexual photos from you in the first WhatsApp exchange that you have with him, and persists in the face of multiple indications that you and attempts to say no. Do you have a comment on that?
That is how I read what I see here. And I think that is, again, back to some very old stereotypes around it is women who lead men on, women who don't know what they want, who say no when they mean yes, etc., etc. The scrutiny is, as you pointed out, on the complainant. It is why we eventually got around to abolishing the cautionary rule in rape cases, because again, it was, well, can we really believe her because there are all these possibilities as to why she might lie. So we have a very long history of, and it's the expression you've often had is, I felt like I was the one on trial.
Yes. And what would become clear from the cross-examination and the questions asked of you, or what becomes clear from the cross-examination and the questions asked of you, is that there is a perception that only a certain type of woman can be harassed. And that is someone who is docile, scared of standing up for themselves or speaking out. Is that correct?
I think really that's a question for argument. It's a question for argument.
No, it's not, Chair. That was specifically a series of...
It is a question for argument. It is a question for argument.
Okay. My question is based on a series of questions asked by Mr. Sikakane.
Maybe you should reframe it.
For the record, Chair, I do want to register an objection to this examination as a gross and, in fact, irresponsible mischaracterization of the cross-examination by Mbenenge.
That may be the perception, but that is how I received that cross-examination as a woman.
And that is why I'm saying, people, this is a matter for argument. You can go and argue it when the time for argument comes.
Okay, let me rephrase it,
The
Chair.
witness has nothing to do with the views that you people are entertaining.
That you people, Chair, you mean the complainant's representatives?
Counsel.
Oh.
The way you see things as counsel is not necessarily the way that she sees. And the way he understands that is not necessarily the way you understand. These are matter eminently for argument.
Well, let me
Don't
rephrase,
bring in the
Chair.
witness to settle arguments between two counsel, please.
No, Chair, it's not an argument with me and my counsel, but with my opponents, but let me ask it differently. Is it possible, Ms. Vetten, that someone who's able to stand up for herself in one context is unable to do it in another context?
Yes, people are not necessarily consistent. And, we feel differently about different people. So some people might be more intimidating to us than others. So, you can be a lot ruder with somebody because you don't fear them, but you might fear somebody else. And I think that's the point we should always remember with people, is that we would like them to be consistent and predictable and to behave in one way all the time. And including myself in this, we are not like that. You always have to look at context, dynamics, interaction, histories.
Yes. Now, Ms. Vetten, you were asked about culture, and you are not an expert on culture.
No.
So I don't want to ask you about your interpretation of cultural practices. You are an expert on gender-based violence and the experience of gender-based violence in the South African context specifically. Is that correct? Would I be correct to say that culture in the South African context is often used as a justification for GBV and sexual harassment of women? And I don't limit that just to African culture. I'm thinking of even the idea that in South African culture we say things like boys will be boys.
Yes, I mean, I think we sometimes, how can we say, culture is, we all have culture. We cannot get away from it. Sometimes I think there is a tendency to speak as if only African people have culture. And I think Mr. Sikhakhane has made this point numerous times, that the assumption that Eurocentrism, it's universal. But we all have culture. It shapes us in many ways. But the other really, really important point about culture that one can never forget is that culture is not monolithic. It's not cast in stone. It changes. It's negotiated, and it's dynamic. And you can even see that being said at the Constitutional Court, for instance, in Bay, for example, where they talk about the fluidity of culture, how it's lived. And it's those earlier points that there is what is officially said and there's what people do. And I mean, it's really important that culture always remain malleable and fluid, because otherwise we would still be living the lives of 2,000 years ago, if not older.
And in South Africa, the Constitution and our laws on sexual harassment, the Code, are designed to protect all victims of harassment, irrespective of race, gender, or ethnicity. That be correct?
Yes, exactly, because I think one must acknowledge difference and plurality, but there's also a point where you could end up fragmenting things where you have 17 different laws to accommodate 17, 18, however many you want to proliferate. So you do need to have some, what will bind a society together is a common set of shared values. And that, I think, is what the Constitution is trying to do. And it is obviously allowing for recognition of difference, but it is trying to have those common sets of shared values that we, all of us, should be.
Well, I'm not going to ask you about your interpretation of the Constitution, because you're not an expert on that. But the point I was trying to make is that the law specifically is culture neutral.
Yes.
Now, you said in your evidence under cross-examination that sometimes lines get blurred when one person's appreciation, was I think the word you used, is another person's sexual harassment. You recall that?
I do.
Now, is that perhaps why the definition of sexual harassment specifically prioritizes a subjective perception of the complainant, so that through the use of the word unwanted, for example? Could you comment on that?
Yes, it does do that. I mean, I must say, whenever I have been educating around sexual harassment, that is the area where there is always the most tension, is, yes, but I'm just appreciating somebody. Or I am just doing this, or I'm just doing that. And that's when one has to have, I think, quite robust engagement to say, well, you may be appreciating, but what is the other person's experience of it? Do they simply accept what you are saying you do, or do you listen and take their feedback as to how they are experiencing this, and they don't experience this as appreciation at all? And therefore you need to modify your conduct. If this is to be if we are to talk about human interactions as exchanges between each other where we negotiate how we are to be treated. So yes, that is why you do need to look at what is the subjective impact on somebody. That is, as far as I understand, part of the test, is to look at how does that person experience it, what do they think about it, do they feel it impairs their dignity. It is subjective.
All right. But presumably you have to weigh in on the respondent's understanding of the situation as well. It can't just simply be a one-sided evaluation.
Of course you do. And that is why I think sometimes, and there is that element, I think, of trying to think about what is reasonable, how would somebody outside the situation look at it. And so you do need to listen to, okay, so what is the respondent's understanding of what is going on? How did the respondent, if they were told to stop, what did they do? Did they listen to that? Did they find other ways to get around it? Did they leave? I mean, I'll think of an example where one ended up having to conclude there was no sexual harassment. Where he'd initially expressed interest in somebody, she'd said, look, I'm not terribly certain right now, maybe, possibly some other time. So he waited 3 months and he asked her, I'm checking to see if you are interested. And she said no. And he did not ever contact her again. You cannot say that he committed sexual harassment under those circumstances. She'd left it open. He'd followed up. She said no. So in that particular matter, we had to conclude there wasn't any sexual harassment. There are also situations where I think you have to look at what does the person do. So, I mean, I'm thinking of a case we recently dealt with. People were offended by his behavior. Was it sexual harassment? No, he might be opinionated and annoying, but what he did not meet that test, did not, I think, amount to sexual harassment.
All right, I want to move on. You asked, in fact, if you can go to the 8th of June, that's page 1170, Chair. 8th of June at 9:10 in the evening, 2110.
$21.10.
2110.
Okay. Yeah.
This is the part of the WhatsApps that you asked about where Ms. Mbenenge says, I wonder if I asked for money, would you give it? Now, this message comes after, so this is at 9 o'clock, 9:10 at night, and the conversation started at about 7 o'clock at night. It's the first day of their WhatsApp exchanges, the 8th of June. So this comes after about 2 hours of WhatsApps on that first night. You were asked for your interpretation of that, and you described it, I'm just summarizing, as transactional. Now, what wasn't put to you is what Ms. Mbenge's explanation of that statement was. Under cross-examination, although I stand to be corrected, it could have been in her evidence in chief, but her evidence was that this statement of hers was because she knew that if you asked a man for money, he would leave you alone, he would run away. And that's why she did that. Does that change your analysis of it being transactional?
No, I mean, in fact, let me see where I can. If somebody says this to you, it is repellent and crude. So I would certainly see, so if you put it in these kinds of terms, I would see it as a way of really repelling somebody. Only the most transactional person would engage with this. But to say that, it's a very crude way to say to somebody, okay, if you want to engage with me, then these are the terms on which it's going to be. And either you're going to like it, you're going to leave it. And clearly he didn't like it. And she doesn't pursue it. So that's why it also would seem to me why it would be something that is intended to be a repellent.
Okay, let's talk about another instance in which Ms. Mbenenge said something that you were asked under cross-examination. It's at page 1229. Sorry, I'm just trying to find how I give you the reference to that. But I'll summarize it. You may be able to find it. It's the section where she said, I want you to remain greedy, so when you come to me.
Linda, there's just one question before we carry on.
Yes, sorry.
I just want to ask Ms. Vetten, where she says, I want money, would you give it? Should you look at it from his perception as well, how he would understand it?
Yes, and he puts his answer there. He is understanding her as asking for money. And his response is life is not about money.
Thank you. The next section I wanted to go to is 23 June. So it's page 1229 of our bundle. And it's 23 June. I think it's 1948. (1946) and then 1948. So the top of the page.
Sorry, 20 June is quite a long conversation, so
Sorry,
Check
in
if
the
I'm not still in
evening,
there.
1946. It's 23 June.
Okay, I'm still in 21st June.
Okay.
6 June, 22. Yeah, 23 June.
Okay. So you recall that conversation?
Yeah.
And that's very clearly sexual. What Ms. Mengo says there is very clearly sexual. She didn't deny that.
Yes.
Okay.
So there are a couple of examples where she is.
You were asked under cross-examination if your evidence on this was limited by your not having spoken to Ms. Mengo. You recall that?
Yes.
I want to put to you what Ms. Mengo's evidence on this was and ask if it changes your answer. So she was asked about this specifically, and she said, I did not want him to have interest. I wanted to satisfy him, otherwise I would never have had rest. To satisfy him with the conversation as he is continuing with the messaging, I was still in the position where I knew he was my boss by making sure I respond to him. The courage I had in my previous messages, he was not cognizant of that or take it serious. That is why then I sought fit to let me rather respond to him, as this is the response he wants. So that was her response. Do you have any comment? Does it change your interpretation of that engagement?
No, it doesn't. I mean, I think the point I was trying to make yesterday as well was that you see her far more sexual comments and responses coming towards the later end of their engagement, not really upfront in their very first conversation. There she's like, let's do this, I will do it, the maths is wrong, you'll give me money. It's not really sexual, but it's as you get deeper into the conversation, as I said, it tapers off after 28th of July, more or less, the sexualized content. She does start making these more explicit comments. So I do read that as somebody who, in a previous section, in a previous session, he's asked her about, will you be intimate with me? No. Go and read the Bible. Well, what about it? No, she says, no. And then she has a picture of, honorable member, I am shocked. But he still persists. So clearly this no, the way I would understand it, is she's realizing not necessarily working. So switching to this might be another way to try to engage, to engage, because he does persist. Even when she says no, he does continue. I mean, in various different ways. He keeps asking for photographs. She said to him, surprise me. But he still wants to continue asking about questions around sexual positions. Even when she doesn't answer in the evening, he picks it up again and wants to continue. And she says, are you still asking me about that? So if you're looking at a thread of conversations over time and how she is changing her engagement or how she's trying to adapt or figure out what's going to stop this, that would be consistent.
Yes. And it's common cause, well, you'll have seen on the WhatsApps that despite an invitation by the judge present or an attempt to meet, that Ms. Mengo did not meet with him, and it's common cause that they never did have sex.
That's right. In fact, she even says to him at one point, are you still asking about that, about the meeting in East London?
Thank you, Ms. Vetten. I appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Just as a general statement, I've had an advert about some of these things which says, a no is a no. What is it that you don't understand about no? You are aware of that advert?
Which part of no don't you understand? Yeah.
Yeah, so that's right. So the starting point, I'm sure, should be where it's clear a no is a no. Isn't that the starting point?
Yes.
Conversely, the starting point should be a yes is a yes.
Yes.
And nobody should second guess a woman when she says no, and nobody should second guess a woman when she says yes.
Exactly. I think the point about...
Sorry.
Oh, so sorry.
Just answer me first. What is your answer?
The yes, you need to look at the context, and I think sometimes the no as well. But that is usually, that would be your starting point. Is that you
Well,
take.
Who thinks they've got the right to second guess a woman when she says no? And who has got the right to think they must second guess a woman when she says yes? Who has got that right?
Well, I think when you are, I'm going to say it in the context of violence, is again the question of.
Sorry, do you find it difficult to answer that question?
All right, put it to me again then. Do you want to put it to me again then?
No, I'm saying, maybe I should rephrase it. Does anybody has got the right to second guess a no? Does anybody has got the right to second guess a yes?
No.
Well, you answered my question. Do you want, I'm satisfied with your answer. You want to elaborate? I thought it was a simple thing.
If I may elaborate, but I mean, maybe that's unnecessary.
Sorry?
If I may elaborate, but maybe that is unnecessary.
Well, unless you want to change the no and change the yes.
No.
If you are not going to change that, then it's not necessary as far as I'm concerned, because I just asked a simple question. Actually, Mrs. Vettel, is it not precisely because we have got problems, precisely because people think they can second guess a no, and simply because people think they can second guess a yes? Isn't that precisely the point?
That is the point. Or that they
Yes.
can infer yes from conduct when they shouldn't always do that.
Well,
Like
no.
short skirts.
Anyway, I wasn't talking about conduct. I was talking about a yes.
Stated
and a
verbal,
no.
yes.
Nobody should second guess any woman, because the starting point there is the adult, they know what they want, and nobody should try to second guess their decision. They must respect it. And no is a no, a yes is a yes.
Correct.
Thank you. I don't know if somebody wants to ask questions about whether a woman's no should be respected or a woman's yes should be respected. I don't know if there's anyone who wants to answer a question about that. Ask a question.
None, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Vettel, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I have no further witnesses to call in the case for the complainant.
Yes, all right, fine, thanks. Mr. Skakani?
Chair, I will open my case with a short statement, but may I take an adjournment? Just want to be sure that when I say witnesses are here, they are. I don't have an instruction about who's available at the moment. Thank you, Chair.
All right, we will wait and
Chair, before you adjourn, we do need a ruling on what our rights are as the complainant's legal representatives cross-examine, I think, before the respondent opens his case.
we were given around, was it around lunchtime? No, not lunch, it's not there yet. At 11 o'clock, we were given some documents. I don't know, I assume it was your application in opposition to it. We haven't even been able to open that because we're busy here. So we can't even tell you when we will make that ruling because we haven't even seen the first page. We haven't
Yes.
even opened.
I understand, Chair. The difficulty is that we do need to know how to prepare and how to proceed before the respondent opens their case. But I accept fully that all of this has come to you very late, just because of the circumstances.
Yes, maybe let me consult with members of the panel. I think let's come together again at 1:45, during which time we would have hopefully had time to look at the application, and also maybe people will have lunch, and then we resume at 1:45.
Thank you, Chair.
We adjourn until then.